With all the talk of creationists trying to get their side of the story told in classrooms, I thought it would only be right to do a video that explained how we know the age of the Earth is fact. In the past, I've used Minecraft to illustrate pretty straightforward concepts like the size of the Earth or the speed of light. But unlike size and speed, there's no set conversion between the age of a Minecraft world and the age of Earth. So instead of showing you how old the Earth is, I'd like to show you one of the tools we use to determine the age of very old things: radiometric dating. More specifically, one type of radiometric dating called carbon dating, which starts at the intersection of Earth and space. Here we see an atom somewhere high in Earth's atmosphere. It could be any atom: oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, you name it. Like all atoms, it's composed of neutrons, protons, and electrons, which aren't shown here because at this scale they would be a couple hundred miles away. Luckily, we're not concerned with them, yet. Those things falling from the sky are cosmic rays, radiation from the sun that travels through space and ends up here on Earth. Occasionally, these cosmic particles collide with an atom. These collisions start a cascade of reactions that create many of the molecules we find in our atmosphere, but the one that we're interested in talking about is carbon dioxide, which of course is used in photosynthesis by plants. This is how carbon-14 enters the life cycle. When a living thing is, well, alive, it is constantly taking in these newly created carbon atoms, usually by eating other things that contain them. But when it dies, the flow of carbon stops, which means all of the carbon-14 inside its remains will never be replenished. Like the living beings they're found in, those carbon atoms have a limited lifetime as well. At any given moment, there's a very small chance that any carbon-14 atom will lose an electron and decay back into nitrogen-14. We call this radiation, which you can actually observe for yourself with a Geiger counter, or in practical terms, a survey meter. Modern survey meters display the presence of radiation as a readout, although most gamers are familiar with the audible clicks these devices can produce. Every click indicates a decaying atom. Thanks to Geiger counters, we can make measurements in real time and know that a gram of carbon-14 inside a living thing loses about 15 electrons per minute. Without getting into the crazy math, this basically means that it will take 5,730 years for half of the atoms in a fresh batch of carbon-14 to turn into nitrogen-14, and another 5,730 years for half of that batch to turn into nitrogen-14, and so on and so on. This is called an atom's half-life. That means if we know how much carbon-14 is left in a creature's remains, such as a shell or a piece of wood, then we also know how long that creature has been dead. Of course, this math is simplified. You're not really measuring absolute percentages of carbon-14, you're measuring the difference between the carbon-14 in the sample and in the environment, but even if the math is harder, the concept remains the same. Unsurprisingly, many samples display ages much longer than 6,000 years, which is when young Earth creationists would have you believe the Earth was formed. And while carbon dating is limited to about 50,000 years, other forms of radiometric data give much longer but much broader date ranges. These dates also fall in line with similar data found in ice cores, geological data, and orbital periods, all of which support the fact that we may not know exact dates throughout Earth's timeline, but we have a pretty good idea. At least enough to know that a 6,000-year-old Earth is an absurd notion being pushed by people with an agenda and no real understanding of science.